Hello, my colleagues. How are you? I'm so happy to see you. Oh, I've been pretty quiet and laying low this past week. I haven't been making many videos at all. It seems like even though I want to kind of put a pace of one video every week as a minimum and as a standard 3 videos per week, I find that 3 has me quite busy. And if this was, if I didn't have a full-time job that took about 11 hours a day or more, or a social life, home life afterwards, I'd probably be able to really, do a lot more on YouTube, which, really I'd like to do that. But suffice it to say, I'm not a millionaire, so I do have a full-time job and other responsibilities. So, I'm here. I'm here and you're here. And so let's just enjoy that. Okay. I did start this summer to do a book review of this book, actually, called Mastering Astral Projection with Robert Bruce and Brian Mercer. So on my channel, you'll also be able to find a week by week progression as sort of like an account of what I've been going through as I follow the exercises from one week to the next. And then around week 5, I didn't do that video, so that's what I'm going to do here today. But I have been continuing with the exercises, so I'm going to try and do video for week 6 probably tomorrow. Although, even though the dates of publication for these videos don't coincide, it's because I haven't made a video in about 4 weeks or so. I've just needed to have some downtime. So I have continued with the exercises, and I'm going to give you my account of them now. So that gives you a bit of a catch-up. And I do have quite a bit to say, though I'm going to be kind of working on, I've reviewed some of my notes. It's a good thing I'm a note taker, and that way I can give you a bit of an account. Even though week 5 for me, having done these exercises in week 5 was a couple of weeks ago now for me. So, without further ado, week 5 talks about trance practice. Now, when you're looking at trance states, it's an altered state of mind. I'm not going to really approach this as though it's some kind of a college or university lecture where you need to take notes and that sort of thing. I'm going to give you a little bit of an experiential account, but I can actually let you know that there's different states of trance. Now, when I was studying psychology, there's what they call different wavelengths, different amount per second, the cycles per second. That's called a hertz, is a cycle per second. And 1 cycle per second is 1 hertz. Now, when you're talking about different trance states, there's the delta state, delta, theta, alpha, beta. So the delta is the first one, where you're basically comatose. You have 0 to 4 cycles per second. So 0 to 4, then 4 to 8, which would be, or 5 to 8 would be theta. That's the next step above. So that's when you're counting the cycles per second when you're measuring your brain waves, right, on an EEG, an electroencephalogram. So that would be theta. So theta. The next one is alpha. When you're in an alpha state, it is 0 to 4, 4 to 8. So that would be 9 to 12. So 9 to 12 cycles per second. And then 13 cycles per second and over would be your beta. So that is high active. That is when your brain is very, very active in those areas. So when you're taking the EEG, the reading of your brain waves, you have different sort of, they're like glued little bits that have wires, right? And it goes to the machine, and that reads the activity that's happening just below the surface, below the skin surface. And so you have some symmetrical sort of areas in your brain. So you have in your parietal and your occipital, your frontal lobe, and with an EEG, you're not going to be getting, deep tissue, sort of like in the center of your brain, but you get like just below the surface sort of reading, so the cortex, the gray matter. And so you'll have different readings here as you would have in your parietal lobe. So they take like a measurement. When you actually see the reading of the EEG, you can actually see that there's a difference between what's going on in your frontal and what's going on in your temporal and what's going on in your parietal lobe in terms of activity. But when we talk about the meditation state, your brain is being in a theta state or an alpha state or in a beta state. That is basically just kind of saying it's the overall sort of measurement that they're taking, like as it reads, so that you're not really saying, well, this is it would be too many readings if you started saying, well, parietal 1, parietal 2, parietal 3. You could have a lot of different measurements throughout your whole brain. So they sort of average it out. That would be the best way to explain it. They average it out and they say, okay, well, the brain is in a pretty relaxed, altered state, and so we would say that it's in a theta or in an alpha state. Okay, so if you're doing a math test or something like that, you're definitely in the highest amount, which would be a beta state. Okay, so that gives you a bit of a kind of a rough overview. Though you probably know that if you've taken any kind of intro psych courses or anything like that, or done any reading online. So here they're talking about in week 5. Page 147, they're talking about a light trance. And so they talk about the alpha level as being a light trance. It's kind of like being in a daydream state. And if you're wondering why my eyes are looking down, it's just because I'm looking at my reference note here where I sort of underline some little bits as I was going along. Because otherwise, if I just try and just do it off the top of my head, it'll be all disorganized. And I should maybe even tell you maybe sometimes for people who create YouTube videos, do you ever get just a whole lot of anxiety? Like I get stage fright, like before I get on, I even avoid making videos, even though I desperately want to, and I would love to. I get really nervous, oh, I'm not gonna. Excuse me, I'm hiccuping. I'm not going to say anything good, or I'm not going to, they're not going to like it, or they're going to prefer to, whatever. I have all of these just thoughts that should not be going on in my head. I should really have a lot more confidence than that. And I shouldn't be should-ing myself. We should over ourselves all over the time, right? All the time. So but I do. I have some kind of weird stage fright in my own home, in front of my own laptop, for a project that I totally impose upon myself, which is having my own channel. Is that not crazy or what? So anyways, I just wondered if somebody else feels the same way, a bit of anxiety, because I'm anything but an extrovert, and yet there's this side of me that just really wants to deliver something to, someone. It's like, if I'm going to read a book, I might as well share it, right? So anyways, there's an aside. Okay, so here they're talking about light trance, and that is kind of like when you're in a daydream state. So I'm sure you've experienced that, where you just kind of start staring and you're fantasizing about what you did last week, or what you would like to do, or you're imagining or remembering. That would be a daydream state, and that is, your brain is predominantly in an alpha level. It's kind of like a light sleep. Okay. And they do talk more about it, but just, they talk about daydreaming and feeling dropping and cobwebs. Do you remember what I said about cobwebs? If I said it in week 4, I'll review it again for you here. Cobwebs is a really interesting kind of a phenomenon that they've labeled here. It's like a tingling sensation. Now, had they not actually labeled it, I would not have thought of it as a state. I would not have thought it anything important. But it happens every time. It happens every time. It happens kind of sometimes when I'm falling asleep, but not really. It's when I'm trying to meditate, and it's like, oh, you got to itch, itch, itch. Now, sometimes I have to say on my back or my arms, oh, my arms are like, oh, and I try and they advise you to ignore it. I cannot ignore it. I have to scratch the darn thing. That brings you out of your state of relaxation, because then you're bringing yourself into your physical body. You're touching yourself brings you back into your reality, into the reality, which we call real, and takes you out of going into your trance state. So they advise against that. But if I don't, I just can't go any further, and it bothers me so much. It feels like bugs. That's how it feels like to me. It's like bugs, like little nippy little spiders or ants or bugs or something, and I just want to like scratch it off, and I get really aggressive about it because I want to do it so quick and stay in my trance state. So I go like, and I almost like rip off part of my skin, it feels like. So it's a very strange and reliable meaning it happens every time the same way, and so it's consistent as another way of saying it, and it always happens when I'm going into a meditative state. So I'm trying to ignore it and letting it happen less and less. Anyways, that's what they call cobwebs, and they say it happens mostly around the face, and I do notice it on my face, but I have other places where it happens too, and that's one of my pet peeves about it. It's aversive to me. I don't want it. So yeah, I would have just ignored it if they hadn't. But then when I read about it, it's like, really, when you get to that level, that's a thing? Like, that's really a thing? So it kind of brings back to me the reality that what I'm doing here, and if you're doing this along with me, that what we're doing here is actually something that follows a process, an experience, because I don't really feel those things in other times of my day. And if I'm not meditating, I don't really feel it at all. And I certainly would have had plenty of opportunity to recognize it. So then there's full trance, and full trance is when you're at a theta level, so delta, theta, alpha, beta. So yeah, so that's just before the before last one on the bottom. So 0 to 4, so it would be like 5 to 8 cycles per second. Not that you really need to know how many cycles per second it is, but it's a deep level of relaxation. And theta, they say it's medium deep sleep. So you're not quite sleeping. You're not at the bottom state. That's a medium deep sleep. Concentration is needed at this point to stop your mind from following your body into sleep. Now, this has been always my experience with meditation. Now, I have yet still to differentiate between this, which is astral projection, or these sort of the exercises they have leading up to, like what will become astral projection, because we're still not projecting yet. We're still just kind of going into the relaxation parts of it. But so these exercises, I can't differentiate them from what I've experienced before, which is meditation. And the meditation that I tend to prefer mostly is guided meditation, because I don't want to have to think about where I'm going or anything. I want somebody else to kind of just, I'll listen to the tape. I'll say, okay, I know where I'm going. This is an okay tape to listen to. It, I agree with the premise of that sort of relaxation exercise, and then I can relax and just let myself go through that exercise in a guided way. So there's that. And the other sort of thing that I'm mulling over with these exercises is on the bigger picture. You might remember the video I did on, it's a book review on controlled remote viewing. And that reminds me very much of the astral projection itself. So before I'm done this book, I'm going to be very curious, and I will definitely, if I don't comment on it on a video towards the end of the book or after I'm done the book, please remember to ask me about comparing my experience in astral projection with what kind of exercises I've done in controlled remote viewing. I'm certainly not an expert remote viewer at all. Otherwise, some big companies would be hiring me. But suffice it to say that I do have a whole selection down here. I'll just kind of bring it down here. No, that's my nutrition books down there on the bottom shelf. So it'll be right here. So this whole section right here, and this is the the free download that you can get if you're interested in controlled remote viewing. I'm taking a big segue on this week 5. I'm just babbling, and it's just going to have to be okay because I'm also learning how to desensitize myself. If I don't put some chatter in here, you know, whatever. It's no good. Okay, yes, and it's below my Ouija board. Okay, I got one. I have one. I bought one. I can use it. Okay. So this stuff here, there's meditation here. Here's the book that I did, Psychic Intuition. And then there's all the really cool guys on this planet. Let me just put this over here. These are the really cool guys. This is Joseph McMoneagle, Len Buchanan. I did his book review for him. He's a super cool. He actually I wrote to him and I told him about my book review and he really liked the book review and I was like, oh my God, I think I grew a foot. Yay! He thinks it's good. I love it. Radiant Minds. This is with Russell Targa's in here. And why am I really liking all these guys? You have to go back to one of my first videos where I talk about controlled remote viewing when I'm giving you the overview of a bit of the history that I know of. But it's really available online. It really is. So these are all the cool guys. Ed Dames, Major Ed Dames. If you really want to look at some interesting interviews, there's Jeffrey Mishlove. He has a channel called New Thinking Aloud. I'm going to put a link below. Have to. He interviews these guys. And if you want to know, like, okay, so my love is psychology, firstly. I also talk about magic and that sort of stuff because for me, that is where science and spirituality meet, is with magic, with people like Christopher Penczak and like everybody else I read. So yeah, Ed Dames. So this one here, this is more astral travel. This is Robert Monroe. And Russell Targ. Russell Targ is just yummy. He also kind of goes into Buddhism and healing at a distance. So that's if you really like Reiki, and because he's an excellent controlled remote viewer. So anyways, these are like the coolest guys on the planet as far as I'm concerned. All of them. And of course they wrote more than one book, so that's another Joe McMoneagle. And the guy who started it all, Ingo Swann, Penetration. You just have to buy a book that's called Penetration. I mean, it's like, so it's a law. It's like a rule written somewhere. You have to buy that. You have to read it. Okay, so yes, I'll have to organize that later because, oh my God, it's going to drive me nuts if I don't clean it and fix it up. Okay, I'm just not going to look at it because it's going to bug me. All right, not looking at it. Oh, I forgot this one too. Okay, I'll just put that down here. Oh, and then there's this one here, Parallel Universe. I have just recently gotten this one. This one I think I bought because Dr. Persinger, I think, contributed to a writing in here. So yeah, I haven't read this one, but that's another one. The Field is another one that's Lynn McTaggart. Although I haven't read that one either. These are my newest ones right here. And then of course Russell Targ here. This one, Reality of ESP. So if you want me to do like book reviews on these things, if you're interested in reading them, I wouldn't mind kind of going through them and reading them on a week-to-week basis. With, you know, if you want to do like a book club or something like that. These to me are really cool books. Oh, and Noreen Rainier. See, this is where it gets really cool. This is the magic, okay? So we're going through like astral projection and learning about astral projection, right? But for me, this is the business. This is the business of astral projection. Is if you get really good at it, so astral projection is different from astral travel, right? So projecting is getting out, your physical self is getting out of your body. And then astral travel is where you're actually going someplace and traveling. And the reason why I want to compare, once I'm done this book, what that experience is with CRV, control remote viewing, is because with CRV, there's a lot less, I don't want to say fanfare, but there's a lot less process and procedure expected to prepare you to be a remote viewer. Or I should say control remote viewing, because if you do their technique, then it's CRV, not RV, and that's a brand name kind of a thing. But so what remote viewing is, when you sit down and you have paper and pen in front of you and you're following this formula which is available in here. Okay, I'll let you read it. And this is available online to print out. So you follow this technique. And if you want to know more about this technique, you can find a very inexpensive course that's being given on udemy.com by Stacy Talich, who he rocks. He just rocks. He is awesome. So you go through a course with him there, and he has a couple of CRV courses. He apparently studied with, I think, like a third generation. So like Ingo Swan would be first generation. All these other guys would be second generation because he trained them. And then third generation would be like Melanie Barnum. Anyway, her book is in here somewhere too, Melanie Barnum. So I think Stacy Talich is either third or fourth generation, so they're training more and more people. Oh God, am I losing my train of thought? My goodness. So if you want to learn more about CRV, and why would you want to learn more about CRV? Okay. So, and what I mean by inexpensive, I think sometimes like Udemy has courses that are like, $12, $15 or $30-some dollars or something like that. So, I mean, you get all the courses when they have like the Black Friday sales or something like that, and you just put the time, and then you have like a lifetime of learning this stuff. And I find that I am good with the CRV stuff. And I was good in the beginning when I knew nothing, and now I know a little bit more than nothing, and I'm better. Like I was going through Stacy Talich's course, and it says, okay, now that you've learned all these different steps to do it, pause this video, and we're going to look at a picture later on. But first, you're going to tell me what this picture is. Okay, so I haven't explained it so far. That's kind of like what CRV can do, that and many other things. So I started describing the picture, and then I was describing like, oh, here's a big circle, and there's direction inwards, and then there's water, and then there's a spiral tower like going upwards on the tower, and I was describing these different things in layers like a stadium. And lo and behold, when I got to the picture, I'm like, how freaking weird is it that I described exactly this? Like, it was a roller coaster going into a pool. There was a pool part of the roller coaster, so that was the going into the circle that I had described. And of course, you're drawing all these things, and you're describing all of these things as part of the exercises, right? And then to the side where the stadium was, the graded sort of stadium that I was describing, well, to that very location on my page, that was there was a building that was shaped in that way, like a stairwise motion. And the spiral sort of tower, well, there was a staircase out in the middle of nowhere outside. So it was a location that I had described on the page. Like, and for people watching this video who probably will like say that nobody can do that, which that's fine. I mean, people have been doing it since at least the 1960s because they write about it, right? Can you see my finger? They write about it. So, I mean, you can write comments below, and that just means you haven't read these books. So, anyways, people can do it. We can do it. It has been done. People in the military have done it, and now people who have done it in the military have retired and who are writing books and training other people on how to do it. So, and every country has people doing it. So that's a nice aside that has nothing to do with week 5 of astral projection. But that is kind of my motivation to get better at CRV, is to go and do other related exercises. Now, I may be totally wrong, but my motivation is to pick up this book and learn the techniques in it, because even though CRV is different from astral projection and astral travel, it is. The thing is that your mind has to go somewhere. And so you could be sitting doing CRV and doing your techniques, and your mind is very lucid. I don't know what state it would be in. It might be in a beta state. It might actually be in an alpha theta state. I don't know. I haven't come across that information, but they're doing their writings, and it ends up being, and they're not in a meditative state. They're not. They're completely lucid. They're joking. They're like talking at a table. They're writing things down. They're communicating with each other, and they're coming up with this information. But still, you are plugging into the knowledge elsewhere. And for me, and it might be a total personal experience, my experience with astral travel or astral projection, as it is right now in my very amateur state, for me it's kind of similar, because I don't have a notepad with me when I'm doing these exercises, but I feel like I'm going places, like I feel like, and there's no way to prove it. There's no like, some $1 million company validating that, yes, between this road and this road somewhere on Beijing, there is the thing that I saw in my trance state. I have no validation at all. So that's kind of like a disappointment. It's like bewilderment. But I know that I am a very intuitive person. I call people as they were just about to call me, kind of thing. But even before you start looking at odd coincidences like that, which can always be argued away, thing is that I can draw things that are someplace else, and how else would I know it other than explaining it with stuff like this? So yeah, that's one of my motivations for going through this this training, this self-imposed training, because I'm deeply connected to it. I really am. That for me is where spirituality meets science. That's my mojo. I don't know. I don't do cool very well. It's my bag. I don't know. It's what I'm learning about. This here, Noreen Renier, I should do a book review on her other book that I borrowed from the library, and where she was talking about the cases that she's worked on. I haven't read this one. These are my new recent ones that I bought last month. But this is called A No-Nonsense Guide to Developing Your Natural Intuitive Abilities. But this author here, Noreen Renier, I'm going to have to do the book review on her other book that I read, which the title befalls me right now. But she wrote about all of her experiences where she was reading tarot cards. And she was doing it at a lounge. Somehow she got connected to some clients, and she explains very well through the book how her accuracy was being noticed. And then she got some people coming into the lounge, and I guess there was a detective who just, they had nowhere else to go. So as a last ditch resort, they went to her and said, "Can you give us something, throw me a bone?" And she was accurate. Now what she was doing might be CRV, it might be astral projection, it might be astral travel, it might be intuition, It might be, see, these things are very fluid in their definition because it's all cognitive. It's all cognitive, abstract, using our brain as the machine, right? So that that is spiritual. It's psychological. It's intuitive. It's all of those things that people are writing about for doing research in universities. And yet, even though the terms do all mean something different, I think there's an interconnectedness to the skills that are involved. In fact, some, I mean, she's had a lot. She's got like cases and cases and cases, like in the hundreds, that she's worked with the FBI and I don't know, police forces all over the place in the States. And look up her name on YouTube, and you will see that she talks about her cases, and there's like documentaries and stuff. So, and what she does is she kind of, when you look at her doing her work, it looks like she goes into this sort of like this, she talks like this, and it looks like she goes into this trance state, right? In week 5, I think it's week 5, that they talk about not using caffeinated drinks or nicotine or kind of substance and stuff, because those can keep you awake and make you hyper, sort of, they're stimulants, right, for your brain. But this lady here, she often has her cigarette, and even at one point in that book, she talks about having, she needed to have a drink because she was helping the police kind of see. She can sometimes see through the eyes of the murderer. She can sometimes see through the eyes of the victim. She can sometimes see through the eyes of a third-party observer. Those sort of experiences that she's talking about sounds a lot like CRV, because you can perch yourself up on the top of a mountain and kind of look down and be pretty much anywhere, and see what there is there. But she doesn't call it CRV. She calls it intuition. So anyway, I'm babbling, but that's okay. You can go to a different channel if you don't like it. If you do, then I'm really happy you're still here. So yeah, Noreen Rainier, if I could do what she does. But she's not the only one who does this sort of stuff. And there are some people who help, like as psychic detectives. There's some people who help the police force, who the police will actually ask them because they have some reliability. And they do use what they say is, of course, when you're watching it on documentaries or in TV shows and stuff, you don't really see what they're, you don't see what they're writing, so I can't verify to say if I can recognize it as CRV, but they'll say, oh yeah, I'm doing some remote viewing, so it's some distant cousin of whatever it is that they learned. So this stuff is really, to me, this is really, really interesting. And my passion for wanting to know and wanting to learn all this stuff kind of runs deep, because I had a very young neighbor who she was 23 at the time. I was 28. I think I just turned 28, actually. And she was murdered. So nobody has, I mean, the murderer is still running around, has never been caught. And I often think that, geez, if somebody could have some intuition, some way to tune into a clue, some psychic detective, whatever it is, astral projection, CRV, whatever you want to call the technique, then that person could be caught. And so at the root of all of my need to read and to, like, all of this, yeah, she's at the base. My friend was at the base. I mean, she wasn't even really a close bosom buddy friend either. She was my neighbor. I knew I was a neighbor. Hi, how are you? Something's bothering you. Do you have somebody to talk to? That was the last time I talked to her. Because she had been killed afterwards. So this person was actually stalking her. Yeah, as far as all this other stuff, all the spiritual stuff, that comes from Thunder Bay. That comes from my time where I met that doctor, and I've talked about that story before. She opened my eyes to crystals and energy healing and all that good stuff. Anyway, so I've digressed quite a bit, and let's move on. So all that, yeah, the stuff that goes on in your mind, all the cognitive stuff, really, that's always been my bag. Always been my bag. Then they talk about, let's see, deep trance, which is your delta state. And that, of course, is your deep sleep. So, let's see, the mind, the dream mind can become active during full trance. So you're going to be spending most, what they call full trance, is your theta level. And they said that you're going to spend most of this program in this book in this theta level. And I can understand why. Because the light trance doesn't get you deep enough. And the deep sleep or delta state is when you're actually sleeping. So then you're no longer kind of like partially aware. And then you will lack the control that you would normally want to have in doing these exercises. So here, this is when they're talking about, what, you want to go outside? Sorry, my dog. Go. I just leave the door open. She just loves to have so much attention. Do you want to see her? Come on. Up. My arms are up here, babe. Come on. Up. Come and give me kisses. Come here. Oh, la love. Isn't she the most beautiful pooch? She is the most beautiful pooch. I just love her so much. I really do. I love her so much. Do you know what? One day I brought my girls, they were very, very young, to the SPCA. And this dog was there. And the story was that you're done with your kisses? You just want more hugs. The story was that she had been found at the dump with her 7 pups. She was nursing her pups. So I don't know how she got found there. The workers that were there, found her, and she was nursing her pups. They were all bony and dying. And so the SPCA got called in. I don't know if they were like dumped there. I don't know if she just found her way to the dump. I don't know the story. All I know is that there were 7 pups, and they were all going to grow. They could tell what the breeds were, and they were going to grow to be bigger than her. She was about 2 years old. Plenty big for me, this medium-sized dog. And so I said, no, I'm going to take the money and give her a better life. And I've been committed to her ever since. I thought about giving her back when I first got her, and she's my very best, she's my very best animal friend. So she's always with me. And she's a healer. She's really, really, very loving. Okay, so let's get on with life. Okay, can I get on with life? You know, interesting thing, I talk about, I love my Canadian mug, and it's so like, Canada has influences from Britain. Now I have hair in my mouth. But it's so not delicate. This cup, it looks Canadian because it says Canada and has a maple leaf, which kind of reminds me of a pentacle from the tarot cards. But the size of it is very like American influenced, you know, where it's an oversized serving. It's late at night now, so I'm just drinking water. But it's not made in China. It's not, I don't know. It doesn't say where it's made. I'm not going to assume that it's like made in Canada just because it's got a Canadian flag on it, because that might not be the case. Like this one here looks a lot more of British influence because, you know, it's delicate. You know, it's delicate. They like pretty dainty things. Made in China. Bone China, England. Royal Albert. That's what it says. Bone China. Anyway. Number 2774. See how pretty it is? See, and these little red dots are sort of embossed, painted, hand painted. That's a lot more sort of like with an English influence to it. I don't know why I'm talking about that. I'm just babbling. Okay. So, focusing is not my big strong suit tonight. I just want to babble. Such is life. Okay. So here they're talking about advising against this caffeine-induced insomnia. Caffeine-induced insomnia. You drink caffeine, stimulates your brain. It takes about 6 hours from the last cup of coffee that you have to be able to start to fall asleep. So, you know, some people might say, oh, I can drink coffee right before going to bed. Woo-hoo-hoo, it doesn't affect me. No. If you're drinking coffee right before you go to bed, you've developed an intolerance to caffeine, probably because you drink a lot of it and you're falling asleep out of exhaustion. And if you were to stop drinking coffee, you would experience headaches and all kinds of symptoms of withdrawal. So the truth is that, it takes several hours for caffeine to get out of your system. And so in a person who doesn't have an entirely caffeinated body, you can experience, if you drink caffeine, a caffeine-induced insomnia. What else can I see? Oh, and you know, for people who are wondering if there's caffeine in tea, in black tea, well, in any tea, I guess. There's like a stimulant also. It's called theophylline. Caffeine is a xanthine, and like xanthine is sort of like the chemical sort of umbrella term. So xanthine is like with an X, xanthine. Is the umbrella term. Caffeine is a type of xanthine, and in tea you'll have theophylline, which is a xanthine derivative. And so theophylline is a stimulant. So like if you have a hard time breathing, you have constricted bronchioles or something, you can drink you can drink tea, black tea with no milk, because milk is mucus forming. You drink black tea, and the theophylline is not a prescription dose. The theophylline in the black tea is not a prescription dose of theophylline, but it can help to open up the bronchioles. So, wow. See, now you see why I write notes. Because if I don't write notes, I babble. Blah, 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 blah. I'm on a tangent. It's like 40 some odd minutes here, and I'm like on page 2? So, okay. Anyway, yes, so some people have a hard time shutting down their internal dialogue. And I'm sure you can appreciate that sometimes I have a hard time shutting off my internal dialogue, but I'm getting a lot better at it. So when I'm getting into the trance state, I can really kind of turn off what I don't want, because I get tired of hearing myself talk, and I try and tune into these exercises that they're giving us is really helping me, because I can focus on something other than my internal dialogue. And we all have it. We all have that voice that talks, like that, that you hear before you say a word. That's your internal dialogue. So some people have a hard time, and they actually kind of walk you through some tips on how to monitor that and how to help you focus on other things. Then they talk about aches and pains and cobwebs that you might feel as you're going into trance. In trance, it sounds so like ooga booga, like trance. When I think about going into a trance state, it sounds so like tribal. I picture people who are dressed with plants and beads and dancing around a fire outside, and with huts and doing some ceremony and going into some tribal, I don't know, it's trance of some kind, painting their bodies or But that's not what this is. That's just not what this is. That's just my own perception of, that's my own ignorant perception of trance. Trance in this case is changing the measurement of your of the number of cycles per second in your brain waves, in your brain state, the activity of your brain. That's what it is. It's changing the level of activity in your brain. That's what trance is. So you're always in a level of sort of like trance, or you always have a level of activity going on. It's just, where is the level of activity, right? So as it's becoming lower and lower in activity, that's what we call trance state, because you're no longer sort of coherent and speaking with somebody else like in an active state. But they talk about different problems that you'll have. Cobwebs, they talk about saliva problems, like your mouth might get dry, and how if you focus on your salivary glands, that it'll help your mouth to water automatically because if you're focusing on them. So you just change the level of your focus to your salivary glands, and then you'll salivate, and that'll help the dry mouth sensation. However, then you're going to have to swallow, and when you're in a trance state, swallowing is something you don't necessarily want to have to think about doing, because it brings you back into your physical body. So you see how intricate it can get. It's very much a mind control sort of a thing. You have to be aware of all sorts of stuff without being aware of other things that you normally do pay attention to. The rapid eye movement. Well, rapid eye movement would normally be in the deep sleep. So I'm not sure why I would have pointed that out. But they talk about it. Here I pointed out anxiety equals time requirements and sounds in the house. Oh, yeah. Okay. So here, when he's talking about the inability to hear, I'm going to just read what I underlined. The inability to enter trance is usually caused by some form of anxiety or stress, resulting in the physical and mental tensions. So he talks about that on page 152. So sometimes I can, if you're stressed or whatever, and it doesn't have to be like any kind of a pathological sort of leveling of anxiety either. It's just, if I have things on my mind, if I'm planning out what I have to do the next day, if I'm looking at the number of hours I have to sleep, if I'm looking at when I'm going to be doing this trance work, do I really have the time to dedicate to it and relax? It's like, okay, have an hour, click, hurry up, trance. Okay, now I'm done the hour. It just doesn't happen that way. There's like an organic sort of fluidity that needs to happen to go into trance state, and I just don't always, I can't always really afford that time to do on a daily basis. I can do shorter, briefer moments, but the exercises that they have is like 5 minutes of this, 5 minutes of that, 5 minutes of that, and then 15 minutes of the new thing that you're learning that day, and then you kind of have different things afterwards. And I don't always have that time to relax, because I have people who depend on me. I have a job to do. I have things to plan for the next day. I have programming to teach. I have, and I'm really interested in managing my channel and hoping that it does well. So, and then the me time is divided into different components too, because not only do I have to do self-care, like take a bath and relax, I also want to read my books. Some books I read for pleasure, and some books I want to summarize as I go because I want to bring them to my channel. So those are all the things that run in my head and then cause sort of like a stress. They're a stressor. So it's almost kind of counterproductive, because if I can't relax enough to do the trance state, then that stops me from being able to have something to talk about. And then I fall behind in my weeks of, my weekly updates of this book. So that's been kind of something else that's been going on and has caused me to sort of lag. It's called life. Life happens, and it gets in the way. Oh man, if I was a millionaire, I could dedicate more time. Isn't that what I came in here to say? I guess that is what I had on my mind. Okay. Then they also talk about making sure that you're going at your own speed. So, which is good, because there's no rush. There's no like an emergency sort of like limit date or something. And if I was to give some advice to you, if you wanted to do this book like in a group or with a couple of people, you'll have to just be mindful of the fact that different people go at different speeds. So if you say every week we're going to meet back here on Sunday night and then we're going to kind of review how you did for the week, there's actually an exercise to do for every day of the week. And if people have, you know, which is great if you're living alone and you have like absolutely nothing going on for like a couple hours a day and you can dedicate it, and you'll feel like dedicating that time every day, then yeah, then everybody in the group will do just fine. But sometimes you just have down days and you just don't feel like touching it. And sometimes you just don't want to meditate, and sometimes you want to and you just don't have the time because other things are calling. So you might want to be mindful of that as a group work. I'd say the best way to do this is on your own in this sort of a format where you can kind of touch base with people as they're going at their own speed, and you just kind of touch base, you know? Sleep paralysis. Oh my God. When I read this, I get that. And for me, it's scary, and I don't like this. It's a deterrent. And I have to say that it also has been deterring me from doing it as often because it is so tremendously unpleasant and scary. So what it is at the moment where, have you ever felt like paralyzed in your bed? Because that's what it is. It's like you're paralyzed in your dreaming trance, sort of lucid dreaming state, in that time where you're aware enough to know that you're sleeping, but sleeping enough to not be able to get out of bed and to fully wake yourself up, but you're like physically like paralyzed, can't move. Yeah, sleep paralysis. And for whatever reason, that experience for me is always accompanied with fear. So, and like an intense fear is how I would describe it for me. So yes, I have had this. It's called sleep paralysis. It's also called waking paralysis. And it's a fairly common phenomenon. It says you wake up paralyzed and suddenly become paralyzed while relaxing or trying to sleep. Walking paralysis can be frightening if the cause is unknown. This will sometimes occur during the trance state. So I have to say that I've experienced that. And since I've been doing this book, especially in these last 2 weeks of 5 and 6 and starting 7 now, well, yeah, honestly, I wanna do more trance work, but I'm sometimes reluctant to, because if I have to experience the unpleasantness of like bugs in the beginning and then like feeling paralyzed at the end, and it wakes me finally, like I kind of like feel like I'm falling, and then I wake up with like a thump like that, you know. And sometimes I wake myself up so much that my entire bed shakes, and that's what wakes me up. Like this is my body. I'm like the bump like that. Like, do you get that? Have you ever had that? I was kind of happy to read it because it's like a thing. It's not just something that I've experienced. It has a name. It's a thing in a book. So, yeah. And the commonly accepted scientific explanation is that the brain dissociates from itself and its physical body during sleep, ostensibly to stop the physical body from thrashing out and mimicking dream actions and thereby injuring itself. Lots of fun. Okay, so let's get on with this because we're boredom barrier, falling asleep. I'm not going to reread the whole book for you. I mean, that would be senseless. So these are all the things that they go through a lot of different explanations. And then once they've actually described what you're going to be learning here for pages and pages for week 5, then you get into like day 29, and then they give you the exercises for day 29, and then day 30 and 31. So here I wrote down, these are all, I'll give you a quick summary here. Day 30 is a ladder technique. Day 31 is a step technique. Day 32 is a climbing down rope technique. And all of these techniques are basically going down. So yes, a ladder, you would be able to theoretically go up and down, but these are all going down. So you're picturing yourself going down a ladder. That is what you learn on day 30. Day 31, the step technique, you're going downstairs. step, 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 all the way down, climbing down a rope. The feather technique, again, you're floating down a feather. The smoke ring technique, again, it's a lot less concrete because like the feather is actually a thing. It's a feather and you're floating down on it. It's no longer like a concrete stair or a rope that you can touch visually, but it's a floaty thing. Then the next progressive exercise is a smoke ring technique where you can't really touch smoke, but you're visualizing smoke rings moving up on your body, and you are kind of floating, moving downward, right? So you have a falling sensation. And then the personalized technique, which is also a downward movement. So this is these are the downward bits, and that's why I was experiencing a lot more of this paralysis. I just went at length about it, and sometimes I wonder if I'm having like early Alzheimer's or something. But okay, so the term is walking paralysis or sleep paralysis. So that's what I'm talking about. These downward techniques that are in this week 5 take you downward and downward and downward, and that's why I think I'm feeling more and more of this sleep paralysis where you feel down, 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 and then boom, like, you know, I shake myself out of the trance state. So that's certainly not intentional. It's just something that's happening, and it's scary, and it's not terribly inviting to go back into that state. So anyways, I'm working through it. Yeah, I'm working through it. That's what I can say about week 5. And it was a couple of weeks later, or a couple of weeks ago. The week 5 was a couple of weeks ago. I think I'm going to leave you at that because I also have to do the week 6 video, and I've actually written it down in my day timer. See my day timer? My lovely day timer that I started on the Witch's New Year, the 31st. And so I'm writing down all of my cool things to do. And today I wrote it down. Make video week 5 astral projection. And I put a little ticky box there so I can put a little check for my ticky box. Done. All I have to do now is upload it, edit any little bits that I don't want. But so there you are. I hope I gave you some food for thought. I know I kind of went on some tangents, but I'm going to put down the timestamp for, I think it's called timestamp, you know, when you put the time for different topics down below in the description box so that you can go up and down and sort of skip over the babble if you want, because that way I can feel comfortable about babbling and you can feel comfortable about, you know, passing over it and skipping to the thing that you want to really watch, which, you know, may not include my ramblings about books. So there you go. Me and my mug. My mug and I. No, wait. Canadian. Me and my mug. If I were to speak like a Brit, I would say correctly, me mug and I. Or some reasonable facsimile. Okay. So there you go. Onward and upward. And I'm going to have to stop clapping my hands. Yeah. This is me. Me with all of my little tics. And whatever. I'm a noodle. See ya. Take care.